I've never been the kind of person who gets excited about Valentine's Day. To me, it was just another overly commercialized holiday. But this year, Emily insisted we do something special. She had heard about a newly opened upscale restaurant that had been getting rave reviews. People described it as magical, soft, intoxicating lighting, a subtle, almost hypnotic fragrance in the air, and a silence so perfect that you could hear your own heartbeat. From the moment we stepped inside, everything seemed flawless. The dim, warm glow of red-hued lights made every table look like a scene from a dream. Crystal glasses shimmered as candlelight flickered inside them. In the background, the gentle hum of classical music played, just loud enough to be heard but soft enough to make you feel like you were in some surreal, intimate world of your own. Emily was happy. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. She held my hand tightly, her fingers warm against mine. But despite how perfect everything seemed, I couldn't shake a strange feeling creeping up my spine. It felt like we were being watched. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But that uneasy sensation only grew stronger. And then, the moment that changed everything arrived. Emily smiled, squeezing my hand gently. "I'll just be back from the restroom." I nodded absent-mindedly, but just before she turned to leave, something odd happened. She hesitated. Her eyes lingered on me longer than they should have, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't bring herself to do it. Then she was gone. I sighed and took a sip of my drink, staring at the crimson liquid swirling in my glass. Only a few minutes had passed when I felt it, a shift. The restaurant, once warm and inviting, now felt off. The air grew unnaturally cold, like an invisible presence had entered the room. The soft hum of voices and clinking silverware seemed to dull, almost as if the entire world around me had faded. Emily didn't come back. I waited, trying to convince myself that she was just freshening up. But when 10 minutes passed, unease turned into something darker, dread. I pushed back my chair and made my way to the restroom, and what I saw there, it made my skin crawl. The restroom door was slightly open. Everything inside appeared normal. The polished marble floor reflected the dim lights above. The glass sinks gleamed as if they had never been used. And a large floor-to-ceiling mirror stretched across the entire back wall. But Emily was gone. I stepped inside, my breath hitching. The stalls were all empty. The silence inside felt heavier than it should have, like the very air was pressing down on me. Something was wrong. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, my reflection. But it wasn't just mine. Someone stood behind me, a shadowy figure with unnaturally long arms, its fingers just inches from my shoulder. Its face was blurred like a smudged photograph, but I could feel it staring at me, watching. My entire body froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then, its lips moved, and in Emily's voice it whispered, "Help me." But Emily was nowhere to be seen. A chill ran through my entire body, an ice-cold dread that seeped into my bones. The voice had been hers, exactly hers. But it hadn't come from behind me. It had come from the mirror. I barely had time to react before something else happened. A faint sound, so soft I almost missed it, came from behind the mirror. A shuffling, a scratch, the unmistakable sound of someone moving. No, not just moving, trying to get out. Without thinking, I reached forward and pressed my palm against the glass. And something on the other side pressed back. The cold, smooth surface of the mirror suddenly felt wrong. It was no longer solid, no longer just glass. It felt like something was shifting beneath it, like liquid trapped behind a thin sheet of ice. Then, a force pulled me forward. I stumbled back, gasping, yanking my hand away as if the glass had burned me. My heart slammed against my ribs, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I turned and ran. I nearly crashed into the restaurant manager. "You have to come. There's something wrong. Emily's missing. There's something behind the mirror." At first, he looked at me like I was crazy. But when he saw the panic in my eyes, he hesitated. He called over another staff member, and together we hurried back to the restroom. When they pushed against the large mirror, a section of it clicked. And then, slowly, it swung open. A hidden door. Behind it was a pitch-black space, the air thick with the stench of damp fabric and something else. Something rotten. The dim glow from the restaurant barely lit the space, but it was enough to see. A cramped, narrow passageway. A hole in the wall, small but just big enough for someone to watch through the mirror. And then, Emily. She was curled, up in the farthest corner, her dress torn, her hands gripping her arms so tightly her nails dug into her skin. She was trembling, her eyes wide and unfocused, filled with something beyond fear. When she saw us, her lips moved. A whisper. "He'll come back." The manager called the police. The hidden passage led to a maintenance exit, but whoever had been inside was gone. No one knew how long that secret space had been there, how many people had been watched without ever knowing it. And Emily? She never spoke of what she saw. She never set foot in a restaurant again. So the next time you find yourself in a dimly lit restroom, standing before a large mirror, ask yourself one thing. Are you sure you're the only one looking? As a journalist, I've always trusted my instincts. It's that same intuition that tells me when someone is lying, when someone is hiding the truth, and when danger is near. And that night, at a famous rooftop bar in Miami, my instincts were screaming at me. I felt like I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. This man knows me. That was the first thought that crossed my mind as soon as he approached us. His name was Henry. At least that's what his name tag said. A tall, well-groomed, and attractive man. He looked like just another bartender, but the moment he glanced at me, I felt as if his eyes were piercing into my mind, searching for something. "Special occasion?" he asked with a smile, but there was something in that smile. Something that sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Just an ordinary night," I replied casually, though my hands had begun to tremble inside. "The first drink's on me," he offered with a grin. Mark, who was sitting beside me, happily picked up his glass, but I could feel Henry's gaze. He was looking only at me, and it wasn't a normal gaze. It was the kind of look that said he had recognized something. Where? Have I seen him before? I questioned myself, but no answer came. As time passed, my unease grew. Every time I looked up, he was already watching me. No sudden glances, no hesitation, just a steady, knowing stare, as if he could predict my every move. And then, everything changed. We decided to leave the bar, but as soon as we stepped outside, my blood ran cold. Henry was behind us. Among the city lights, in the midst of dozens of people, he was there, walking silently. No sound, no rush, just an eerie, quiet pursuit. "Did you see?" Mark whispered. "Yes." My heart pounded in my chest. We picked up our pace, but when I glanced at a store's glass reflection, a shiver ran down my spine. He was watching us, but he wasn't walking anymore. He was just standing there, as if waiting for us to take the next step. "Run!" Mark grabbed my hand and we dashed into a nearby 24-hour convenience store. Inside, I tried to steady my breathing. Mark peeked outside. "He's gone?" After a few moments, it seemed true. He was nowhere to be seen. Maybe it was just my imagination. I tried to reassure myself. But the moment we stepped out, my entire body froze in terror. Henry was standing there, in the exact same spot. As if he had known we would come out. He was pretending to look at his phone, but his fingers weren't moving. No scrolling, no typing, just eerie stillness. My heart pounded like an explosion in my chest. "Mark," I whispered, "we need to get out of here. Now." Mark quickly booked an Uber, and we rushed toward the main road, blending into the crowd. Henry didn't follow us, but I knew he was watching. As soon as the car arrived, we jumped in. I didn't dare look out the window. I was too scared that if I did, I'd see him still standing there. "It's over now, right?" I tried to convince myself. But the next morning, when I checked my phone, there was a message from an unknown number. "Why did you leave so soon?" My breath hitched. My fingers froze. I immediately blocked the number, but from that day on, I always double-locked my doors, kept my windows shut, and whenever I stepped outside, every unfamiliar face felt like a potential threat, because I knew this wasn't over yet. Can you imagine how an ordinary night in an ordinary place could change your life forever? Sometimes danger is right in front of you, but you only realize it when it's already too late. That's what I felt when the door of that white van slowly slid open. The air was cold. Phoenix doesn't usually get too chilly, but that night there was something unsettling about the wind. As we stepped out of the restaurant, I felt it. Something about this night was off. My boyfriend, Matt, and I had just finished dinner at a Desert Pines steakhouse. The night had gotten colder, and I pulled my jacket zipper up a little higher. Matt was laughing. "All I'm saying is that cheesecake is the best dessert." I smiled. "Wrong. Nothing beats molten lava cake." He shrugged. This might be a deal breaker. But my smile instantly faded. Right next to our car was a white van. My heartbeat picked up. "Was that van here before?" I asked. Matt glanced at it. "I don't think so. Maybe someone just parked weirdly. But something about it felt wrong." It was an old white cargo van, the kind with no windows in the back. The paint was worn out and the engine was running. "This feels weird," I murmured. Matt chuckled. "You always find suspense in everything." And then, the side door slowly slid open. No loud noise, no sudden movement. Just a slow, silent shift, like whoever was inside wanted us to notice. I held my breath. Inside was nothing but darkness. And someone was in there. No, two people. Standing perfectly still, not moving. Just waiting. I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel it. They were just watching, waiting for us to come a little closer. Matt suddenly grabbed my hand, squeezing it so tight it hurt. "Turn around, now." His voice was serious. No jokes, no doubt, just pure fear. We ran. My heart was pounding, my legs felt heavy. Every step, I felt like someone was behind us, reaching out, ready to grab me. By the time we reached the restaurant's glass doors, I could barely breathe, but we made it inside. The hostess looked at us, startled. Are you guys okay?" Matt turned to the nearest waiter. "Call security, now. There's a van outside, 2 men inside. They were about to do something." I was gasping for air. My hands were still shaking. Security came, but the van was gone, as if it was never there. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not even for a second. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the darkness inside that van. I saw those two people, just waiting. The next morning, I did some research, and what I found shook me to my core. Phoenix had dozens of similar cases. White cargo vans, random parking lots, girls disappearing, and the scariest part? Most of them were alone when it happened. One thought kept haunting me. What if I had been alone? What if Matt wasn't there? What if we had walked just a little closer? I never walk near a van anymore. Never. And if you're reading this, you shouldn't either. Because sometimes, the door opens right in front of you, and you don't get the chance to run. Sarah never imagined that a romantic date night would turn into the most terrifying night of her life. She had lit candles, poured wine, and put on her favorite dress. Everything was perfect. The soft glow of candlelight reflected in the mirror, making the evening feel almost magical. But one small thing, just one tiny detail she noticed, changed everything. Because sometimes the person you're on a date with isn't really who you think they are. Sarah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her favorite red dress. Perfect. The deep crimson fabric hugged her figure in just the right way. Her curls fell effortlessly over her shoulders. Her lipstick was a flawless shade of red, and there was that unmistakable sparkle in her eyes, the kind that only appeared when she was genuinely excited. Tonight was special. Her boyfriend, James, was picking her up soon. They had been together for 3 years, and he had planned everything for tonight. Tonight is a surprise, he had whispered over the phone earlier. Sarah loved surprises. She smiled to herself as she spritzed on her favorite perfume, the subtle floral scent filling the air. A car horn honked outside, right on time. Sarah grabbed her clutch, gave herself one last look in the mirror, and stepped out. The restaurant was dimly lit, warm, and inviting. Golden light flickered from small candles on each table, the air rich with the scent of wine and slow-cooked meals. A soft jazz tune played in the background, wrapping the room in a cozy, intimate atmosphere. It was perfect. James reached across the table, taking her hand gently. His touch was warm, his smile effortless. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured. Sarah smirked playfully. "Just tonight?" James chuckled, shaking his head. "You know what I mean." But then, for a fleeting moment, something shifted. His expression wavered. Sarah watched as his eyes drifted past her shoulder, staring at something behind her. His face remained calm, but his gaze was distant, focused, unblinking. A strange chill crawled up Sarah's spine. "Is everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head. James hesitated for just a second, just long enough to make her uneasy. Then, he blinked, his usual charming smile returning. "Yeah, of course, just relax." Sarah wanted to believe him, but something felt off. She discreetly slid her hand from the table and shifted slightly in her chair, just enough to get a better angle of the restaurant's large mirror behind James. Her breath caught in her throat, because behind James, at a table just a few feet away, was another James identical. The same navy blue suit, the same neatly styled hair, the same smile. Sarah's hands turned ice cold. And the scariest part? The second James wasn't looking at his date. He was staring, right at her. Sarah's fingers tightened around her napkin, her palms damp with sweat. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She slowly turned back to the James sitting in front of her, the one holding her hand, smiling like nothing was wrong. She swallowed hard. Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe it's just someone who looks like him, but then she saw it, or rather she didn't see it. James's reflection was missing. The napkin in her hand slipped from her grasp. The candlelight flickered. The air felt heavier, suffocating. She wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but her body refused to move. James's voice cut through the silence. "Sarah?" His tone was soft, casual. "You okay?" She forced a shaky smile. Yeah. I just need to use the restroom for a second." Sarah locked the restroom door behind her, pressing her back against the cool wood. She took a deep breath, then another. "This is all in my head," she whispered. She turned to the mirror above the sink. Her own reflection stared back, eyes wide with panic. But nothing seemed off. Everything looked normal. Still, an invisible force in her gut screamed, "Leave. Now, her." Hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and quickly typed a message to James. "I'm not feeling well. I'll call you later." She inhaled deeply, cracked the door open, and peeked outside. Her stomach dropped. James was standing right there. His smile was the same, but his eyes, they didn't blink. "Are you okay?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Sarah swallowed, forcing herself to nod. "Yeah, just feeling a little dizzy. I'll call an Uber." James tilted his head the other way. A pause, then he smiled. "No need. I'll drive you home." Her instinct screamed, "Don't go with him." But her legs moved on their own. James reached for her hand. She flinched. It was ice cold. By the time they reached the restaurant entrance, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She turned sharply to look at the mirror near the doorway. Her breath caught in her throat. There was only one reflection, And it wasn't James's. She spun around, just as James leaned in close. Before she could scream, his hand clamped over her mouth. His lips brushed her ear, whispering in a voice that was almost amused. "I told you. Tonight is a surprise. Do you ever check your date's reflection?"